Am I the asshole for refusing to give my sister my baby's name after she lost hers? I know the title sounds heartless. Trust me, I've typed it out 6 different ways, and every single version makes me sound like the villain. But yesterday, my mom stood in my kitchen, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "You already have a baby. Your sister has nothing. Let her have the name." And the worst part? For about 3 seconds, I actually considered it. Then my husband said one sentence that made the entire room go silent. He said, "Ask her why she really wants it." And that's when everything fell apart. I'm 29 female. My husband, Ryan, is 31 male. We've been married for 4 years, together for almost 9. We recently had our first baby, a little girl, 6 weeks ago. Her name is Clara Mee. Clara was my grandmother's name. Mee was Ryan's grandmother's name. Both women were huge parts of our lives, and both passed away within the last 3 years. So this wasn't just a cute baby name we found on Pinterest. This name had history. It had weight. It was the kind of name you whisper to yourself when you're folding tiny onesies at 2 a.m. and wondering how someone so small can make your entire life feel different. We had the name picked out long before I was even pregnant. Actually, we picked it out on our honeymoon. We were in this tiny bed-and-breakfast by the coast, and we were joking about future kids. Ryan said if we ever had a girl, he wanted to use me somehow for his grandmother. I said I'd always loved Clara for mine. Then he said, "Clara Mee." And that was it. That was her. For years, whenever we talked about our someday baby, we called her Clara Mee. Not publicly, not on Facebook, not embroidered on anything, just between us. My sister, Emily, 27 female, knew this. Everyone in my family knew this. That becomes important later. Emily and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's not evil. I don't want to paint her like some Disney villain, but she's always been intense. Growing up, if I got something, she needed something bigger. If I got a blue bike, she wanted a pink bike with a basket and streamers. If I got in a choir, she suddenly wanted voice lessons. If I had a birthday dinner at a restaurant, she cried because she felt excluded from choosing the place. My parents always explained it as, "Emily just feels things deeply," which somehow meant everyone else had to feel things quietly. I learned very young that peace in our family usually came from me giving. And I did, a lot. I gave her clothes she borrowed and never returned. I let her take credit for party ideas. I let her announce her engagement at my graduation dinner because the whole family was already together. Ryan was actually the first person who ever said, "You know you're allowed to be upset, right?" At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I think he saw the pattern before I did. Emily got pregnant about 2 months after I did. At first, I was genuinely happy. She had been trying with her husband, Mark, for almost a year. Ryan and I got pregnant unexpectedly, so I was careful not to be annoying about it. I didn't complain about nausea around her. I didn't constantly bring up appointments. I tried to be sensitive. When she announced, everyone was thrilled. My mom immediately started calling us the twin pregnancy sisters, which I hated but tolerated. Emily loved it. She wanted matching bump photos, matching baby shower themes, matching nursery colors. She even joked that if we both had girls, they should have twin names. I laughed it off. Then came the name conversation. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I was about 22 weeks pregnant. Emily was around 14 weeks. My mom asked if we had names picked. I said yes if it was a girl, Clara Mee. Emily got really quiet. Then she smiled and said, "That's cute." Not enthusiastic, just tight. A few days later, she texted me, "Are you 100% set on Clara Mee?" I replied, "Yeah, we've had it picked for years." "Why?" She said, "No reason, just wondering." I didn't think much of it. 2 weeks later, she told the family that if her baby was a girl, she wanted to name her Clara May, spelled M-O-Y. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Ryan was sitting next to me when she said it, and I felt his hand tighten around mine under the table. My mom clapped and said, "Oh my gosh, the cousins would have matching names." I said, probably too sharply, "That's our name." Emily immediately got teary. She said, "You don't own a name." Which, technically, is true. But come on, Clara Mee and Clara May, same first name, same middle name sound, cousins born weeks apart. I said, "Emily, you knew that was the name we chose." She said, "I didn't know you were actually using it." Ryan said, "We've been saying it for years." Then Emily said something that made my stomach twist. She said, "Well, I'm pregnant too. You don't get to claim everything just because you got pregnant first." That became the theme. I got pregnant first. I announced first. I found out the gender first. I was taking all the firsts. No matter how much I tried to include her, she acted like my pregnancy was something I was doing at her. Eventually, we found out we were having a girl. Clara Mee became real. Emily refused to find out the gender of her baby, but kept saying, "If it's a girl, I'm still using Clara May." For weeks, it was this cloud over everything. My dad stayed out of it. My mom said we should both compromise. Her suggested compromise? I use Clara as a middle name and Emily use it as a first name because Emily needed a win. Ryan said absolutely not. I said absolutely not. Emily cried. My mom called me selfish. Then everything changed. At 24 weeks, Emily lost the baby. It was awful. There's no other way to say it. Whatever issues we had, whatever tension existed, it disappeared overnight. She delivered a stillborn baby boy. A boy. His name was Oliver James. I still remember sitting in the hospital parking lot with Ryan, holding a bag of food neither of us knew if we should bring inside, just sobbing. Because no one deserves that. No one. Emily was destroyed. Mark was destroyed. My parents were destroyed. And I felt guilty. Not because I caused it. Obviously I didn't. But because I had spent so much of my pregnancy stressed and angry about a name, and then suddenly she didn't have a baby to name at all. For a while, I stopped talking about my pregnancy almost completely. I didn't send bump pictures. I didn't mention nursery updates. I didn't complain about back pain or cravings. When people asked how I was, I said fine and changed the subject. Emily didn't come to my baby shower, which I completely understood. I sent her a message saying I loved her, I understood, and there was no pressure. She didn't reply, again, fair. Then Clara was born, 6 weeks ago. She was tiny, healthy, and perfect. We announced her name with a simple post. Clara Me arrived safely, named for 2 women who taught us what love looks like. Emily didn't like it, didn't comment. I didn't expect her to. 3 days later, my mom came over to meet Clara. She cried, held her, said she was beautiful. Then she asked if we had already filed the birth certificate. I said yes. She got this weird look on her face. I asked why. She said, no reason. I should have known. 2 weeks after Clara was born, Emily texted me for the first time in months. It said, can we talk? I said of course. She came over alone. She looked awful. Pale, thin, like she hadn't slept in weeks. I hugged her. She barely hugged back. We sat in the living room while Clara slept in the bassinet. For a while, Emily didn't say anything. Then she looked at Clara and started crying. I told her we didn't have to do this today. She said, no, I need to. Then she said, I want to use Clara. At first, I thought she meant someday, like if she had another daughter in the future. I said gently, Emily, she interrupted me. No, I want to use it for Oliver. I was confused. She explained that she and Mark were planning a small memorial ceremony. They wanted to rename their baby, or rather add a memorial name. She wanted him remembered as Oliver Clara James. I didn't know what to say. She said Clara meant bright or clear, and after losing him, she kept thinking of light. She said it felt like the name had been meant for her baby all along, but she didn't understand how until now. I was trying really hard to be compassionate. I said, I understand why the meaning matters to you, but Clara is our daughter's name. Emily said, your living daughter's name? That sentence hit me like a slap. She immediately said, I didn't mean it like that. But she did. Maybe not cruelly, but she meant it. She said, you get to say her name every day. I don't. I said, Emily, I am so sorry, but I can't give you my child's name. She said I wouldn't be giving it away. We'd be sharing it. I said no. She asked if I would consider changing Clara's name to me as her first name since she was still too young to know. I honestly thought I misheard her. I said, you want me to rename my baby? She said, you could still call her Clara at home for a while and transition slowly. That's when I stood up. I told her I loved her, but the conversation was over. She started sobbing and said, you have everything, I'm asking for one thing. I said, you're asking for my daughter's identity. She left. I cried for an hour. Ryan came home, and when I told him, he didn't even look surprised. He just looked tired. Then he said, she's not grieving Clara, she's grieving control. I got defensive because that sounded harsh. He said, I'm not saying she isn't in pain, I'm saying pain doesn't make this okay. And deep down, I knew he was right, but then my family got involved. My mom called me the next day. She said Emily was inconsolable. She said I had re-traumatized her. She said I was being possessive over letters on paper. Then she said the line I mentioned earlier, you already have a baby, your sister has nothing. Let her have the name. I told her Clara is not an object. My mom said, no one is saying she is. I said, you are literally asking me to rename her. My mom said, she's 6 weeks old, she doesn't know. I said, I know, there was silence. Then my mom said that was cruel. Maybe it was, but I was done pretending this was normal. My dad called later. He was calmer but basically said the same thing. He said, your sister is drowning. Sometimes family throws a rope. I said, not if the rope is tied around my baby. He sighed and told me I was being dramatic. Mark, Emily's husband, messaged Ryan. Apparently, Emily had told him that I had promised years ago she could use Clara if she ever needed it more. That never happened. Ryan asked for screenshots. Mark didn't reply. Then my aunt posted a vague Facebook status about mothers without compassion. I knew it was about me because my cousin sent me a screenshot and said, "What the hell is going on?" I didn't answer. For the next week, I got messages from relatives telling me grief is complicated, names can be shared, and I should be the bigger person. The bigger person. I swear if I ever get a tombstone, it'll say, "Here lies the bigger person." She finally stopped moving. Ryan wanted to block everyone. I didn't, because despite everything, I kept thinking, what if they're right? What if I'm being selfish? What if Emily is clinging to this name because it's the only thing keeping her afloat? Then came the memorial invitation. It was a simple cream-colored card. At the top, in gold lettering, it said, "Celebrating the brief but beautiful life of Oliver Clara James." I stared at it for a long time. Ryan saw it and said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Maybe we should go." He said, "To a ceremony where they renamed her son with our daughter's name after you said no?" I said, "It's not that simple." He said, "It is exactly that simple." We argued, not screaming. Just that awful low voice arguing you do when there's a sleeping baby in the house and too much resentment in the room. I said he was being cold. He said I was confusing compassion with surrender. Then he said, "You know this doesn't end with the memorial, right?" I asked what he meant. He said, "Once that name is on programs, ornaments, keepsakes, posts, your family will act like Clara's name belongs to Emily's loss first and our daughter second." I hated that, because I knew it was true, but I still felt guilty, so I called Emily. I told her we received the invitation. I said I loved her, but seeing Clara used that way hurt me. She was quiet. Then she said, "Good, now you understand a fraction of how I feel every time I hear your baby's name." I didn't know what to say. She continued, "She was supposed to be mine." I said, "Who?" Emily said, "Clara." And that's when the first real twist happened, because she wasn't talking about the name. She was talking about my baby. There was this long silence after she said it. The kind where your brain knows something is wrong before your heart catches up. I actually laughed a little because I thought I misunderstood her. I said, "Emily, what are you talking about?" And she said, very quietly, "I was supposed to have the first granddaughter." Not a granddaughter, the first one, like it was a title someone stole from her. I felt this horrible cold sensation crawl up my arms, because suddenly a lot of things started making sense. The matching pregnancy obsession, the matching names, the constant competition, the weird tension every time someone bought something for Clara. It wasn't about a name, it was about losing. And somehow, even after losing a child, which is devastating beyond words, Emily still viewed motherhood as a competition she had to win. I said, "This isn't healthy." She immediately got defensive. "You think I'm crazy now?" "No, I think you need help." Then she started crying again, not soft crying, angry crying. She said, "You have no idea what it feels like to leave a hospital empty-handed." And instantly I felt guilty again. That became the cycle. She'd say something alarming. I'd react. Then she'd say something heartbreaking. And suddenly I felt like the monster. She told me she couldn't sleep because every time she closed her eyes, she imagined what her daughter would have looked like. I corrected her gently. "You had a boy." And she snapped, "I know what I had." Then she covered her mouth like she shocked herself. We were both quiet. Finally, she whispered, "I just thought maybe this was the universe correcting itself." That sentence stayed with me, correcting itself, as if my baby was some clerical error. I ended the call after that, not dramatically. I just said I thought she needed support that I wasn't qualified to give. Then I hung up. Ryan listened to the whole thing from the kitchen. When I told him what she said, his face completely changed. Not angry, protective, which honestly scared me more. He said, "She is not okay around the baby anymore." I immediately said that was unfair, because despite everything, Emily had never hurt Clara, never threatened her, never acted dangerous. But Ryan asked me something I couldn't answer. He said, "Do you trust her?" And I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I didn't know anymore. Against Ryan's wishes, I decided to go to the memorial. Before anyone jumps on me, let me explain. I wasn't going because I approved of the name thing. I was going because grief makes people irrational sometimes, and I thought maybe this ceremony was just part of Emily trying to survive the worst thing that could happen to someone. Also, if I'm being honest, I wanted my family to stop acting like I was some cartoon villain hoarding baby names like a dragon sitting on gold. Ryan agreed to come, but only if Clara stayed with his parents. He said he didn't want our daughter there. At the time, I thought he was overreacting. Now, I'm grateful he insisted. The memorial was at this small botanical garden about 20 minutes from my parents' house. Very quiet. Very tasteful. White flowers everywhere. Photos of Emily pregnant arranged beside candles. A little memory table with ultrasound pictures and tiny knitted baby shoes. It was heartbreaking. I cried almost immediately. Emily saw me arrive and hugged me tighter than she had in months. For a second, I thought maybe this was going to heal things. Then I looked past her, and my stomach dropped. Because on the memorial display, written in giant wooden cursive letters, was Clara, not Oliver. Not Oliver Clara, just Clara. I looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at me, and I could literally see the exact moment he stopped trying to be patient. I asked Emily quietly, "Why does it only say Clara?" She smiled through tears and said, "Because that's who she was supposed to be." She, again, I said, "Emily, your baby was a boy." And she said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. She said, "Maybe biologically." Ryan immediately stepped between us, not aggressively, just enough to create space. And he said, "We're leaving." Emily started crying harder and grabbing my arm, saying I didn't understand. She just needed something beautiful to come out of this. Then my mother appeared out of nowhere and hissed, "Don't do this here." Which was rich, considering they were the ones publicly using my daughter's name after I explicitly said no. Ryan told my mom this entire thing was inappropriate. My mom snapped and said, "She lost a child. What's your excuse?" And that's when the second twist hit, because Mark, who had been silent almost the entire time, suddenly said, "That's not actually what happened." Everything stopped. Emily whipped around and stared at him. My mom went pale instantly. Ryan narrowed his eyes. I said, "What do you mean?" Mark looked exhausted, like truly exhausted. The kind where someone has been carrying something heavy for too long. Then he said, "Emily told everyone the baby died naturally." My chest tightened. "She didn't." Emily started shaking her head immediately. "Mark, stop." But he kept going, and apparently this had been building for weeks. He said the doctors had discovered severe abnormalities during the pregnancy, not minor ones, catastrophic ones. The baby had almost no chance of surviving outside the womb. And if he did survive, his quality of life would have been devastatingly poor. Mark's voice cracked when he said this part. Then he said they made the decision to terminate the pregnancy medically. The entire garden went silent. My mom burst into tears. Emily started screaming at him, not crying, screaming. "You promised you'd never say that." People were staring. An older relative literally grabbed her purse and left. Mark looked like he might throw up. And suddenly all the pieces started rearranging themselves in my head. The secrecy, the intensity, the obsession, the rewritten narrative. Emily had built an entire alternate reality around this loss. One where fate stole her perfect daughter. One where life unfairly handed me the child meant for her. One where changing Oliver into Clara somehow repaired the story. And I need to be clear, I am not saying her grief wasn't real. It absolutely was. But grief mixed with denial can become something else, something dangerous. Emily started yelling that Mark betrayed her. Mark yelled back that he was tired of lying to everyone while she spiraled deeper every day. Then he said something that made every hair on my body stand up. He said, "You redecorated the nursery with pictures of her baby." Her baby, meaning Clara, meaning my baby. I felt physically sick. I said, "What?" Emily immediately shouted, "That's not true." Mark laughed, not funny laughter. That awful broken laughter people do when they've crossed into despair. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me. I wish he hadn't. I genuinely wish I could unsee it, because there on his screen was the nursery, and on the wall above the crib was a framed photo of me holding Clara in the hospital. Underneath it, in wooden script, were the words, "What should have been." I couldn't breathe. Ryan took the phone from him. His face went completely blank, which is terrifying, by the way. People think yelling is scary. No, the scariest thing in the world is when a calm person goes emotionless. Emily started sobbing and trying to explain. She said it wasn't what it looked like. She said she was processing. She said therapy told her to externalize her grief. Then she admitted she hadn't actually gone back to therapy after the first 2 sessions because the therapist didn't understand. Ryan handed the phone back to Mark and said, "We're done here." My mom started crying harder and saying Emily needed support, not judgment. And then Ryan said the sentence that detonated the entire family. He said, "Support stops where my daughter's safety starts." The word safety made everyone freeze, because suddenly the situation sounded real, not family drama, not sisters fighting. Real. Emily looked horrified. She said, "You think I'd hurt her?" Ryan answered immediately, "I think you need help badly enough that I'm not willing to gamble." That made Emily collapse into hysterics, and I mean full-body sobbing. People rushed toward her. My dad started yelling at Mark. My aunt started yelling at Ryan. Someone knocked over candles. The entire memorial turned into chaos. And right in the middle of all of it, I realized something awful. Nobody had asked me how I felt. Not once. Not during the name fight. Not during the pressure campaign. Not during the memorial. Everyone was so focused on protecting Emily from consequences that nobody noticed they were slowly erasing me. And worse, they were erasing Clara too, reducing my actual living child into a symbol for someone else's grief. That realization hurt almost more than the nursery photo, because it meant this wasn't one bad decision. This was years of conditioning, years of everyone prioritizing Emily's emotions over reality itself. And suddenly, I saw my future clearly. Every birthday becoming about Emily's loss, every family event becoming tense, every mention of Clara reopening this wound forever, unless someone stopped it. So I did something I've honestly never done before. I chose my own family first. I took Ryan's hand, and we left. We didn't speak the entire drive home, not because we were angry at each other, because we were both trying to process what the hell we had just witnessed. Ryan kept both hands tight on the steering wheel the whole drive. I kept replaying the nursery photo in my head. What should have been? Every time I thought about it, my stomach twisted harder. When we picked Clara up from Ryan's parents' house, I cried the second I held her. Not dramatic sobbing, just silent tears, because suddenly motherhood felt different, more fragile, like I'd been walking around believing love alone kept your child safe. And then reality reminded me that sometimes the people who love you can become the people who scare you. Ryan's mom immediately noticed something was wrong. She asked if the memorial went badly. Ryan just said, "We're taking some distance from my in-laws for a while." His mom didn't pry, which, honestly, was refreshing after my family. That night, Ryan asked if I wanted him to install the security cameras he bought when Clara was born. I laughed nervously and asked if he seriously thought we needed them. He said, "I seriously hope we don't." That answer terrified me more than if he'd said yes. The next morning, my phone looked like a bomb went off. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, family group chats exploding. Apparently half the family thought Mark was a monster for revealing private medical information. The other half thought Emily needed immediate psychiatric help, and somehow, even after everything, some people still blamed me. One message from my aunt literally said, "If you had just shared the name, maybe none of this would have escalated." As if my daughter's identity was the magic key to preventing a mental health crisis. I didn't respond. Then my mom called. Against my better judgment, I answered. She was crying immediately. Not angry crying this time. Exhausted crying. She said, "I didn't know about the nursery." I believed her. Honestly, I think my mom had been doing what she'd always done with Emily, managing symptoms instead of confronting reality. Minimizing, excusing, redirecting. But now reality had kicked the door open. My mom said Emily was in a very dark place. I said she needed professional help. My mom whispered. She says everyone is stealing her baby. That sentence made the hair on my neck stand up. I asked what that meant, and my mom hesitated, which is never good. Then she admitted that after we left the memorial, Emily locked herself in the bathroom for over an hour. When she finally came out, she accused Mark of giving Clara away. Not the name, the baby, as if Clara literally belonged to her somehow. I sat down slowly while my mom talked because my legs suddenly felt weak. My mom kept saying, "She doesn't mean it. She's grieving." Maybe that was true. But intent stops mattering a little when behavior becomes unpredictable. I asked where Emily was now. My mom said she was staying with them because Mark needed space. That phrasing told me everything. Not Emily needed space. Mark did, which meant things were worse than anyone admitted. Then my mom asked the question I knew was coming. She asked, "Can you please not keep Clara away forever?" And there it was, still centering access to my baby. Not my feelings, not my fear, not the fact that my sister had built an alternate reality around my child. Access. I said carefully, "Right now, I'm not comfortable with Emily being around Clara." My mom started crying harder. "She's your sister." I said, "And Clara is my daughter." Silence. Then my mom said something that genuinely changed how I saw my childhood. She said, "You've always been the strong one." And for the first time in my life, instead of feeling proud, I got angry. Because what she really meant was, "You've always been the one we expected to absorb the damage." I asked her, "Do you know how many times I gave things up because Emily couldn't handle disappointment?" My mom got quiet, so I kept going. I brought up the graduation dinner, the birthday parties, the engagement announcement, the years of emotional hostage situations disguised as sensitivity. And finally I said, "You didn't raise Emily to cope, you raised everyone else to accommodate her." Dead silence. Then my mom whispered, "I did my best." And immediately I felt guilty, because that's the trap, right? The second you finally say the truth out loud, you feel cruel for saying it. I told her I loved her, but things needed to change. Then I hung up. 3 days passed quietly, too quietly. No messages from Emily, no calls, no social media drama, just silence. Ryan said silence worried him more. I told him he was catastrophizing. Then the package arrived. No return address. Just my name written in Emily's handwriting. I almost opened it immediately. Ryan stopped me. He checked it first, which felt ridiculous at the time. Now I'm grateful. Inside was a baby blanket. Handmade. Beautiful, honestly. Soft cream-colored yarn with tiny embroidered flowers, and stitched into the corner in delicate cursive were the words for Clara. Love, Mom. My blood went cold. Not Aunt Emily. Mom. Ryan looked furious instantly. I just stared at it, trying to rationalize it. Maybe she meant it symbolically. Maybe grief had scrambled her thinking. Maybe. Then I unfolded the blanket completely, and another line appeared underneath. Smaller, almost hidden in the stitching. I'll always find my way back to you. Ryan took the blanket out of my hands immediately. I remember saying, nope. Not screaming, not crying, just nope. That was the moment fear became real. Ryan asked if I was finally willing to call someone. And honestly, I still hesitated, because part of me kept thinking, what if I'm overreacting? That's what growing up in a family like mine does to you. It teaches you to distrust your own alarm bells. But Ryan didn't hesitate. He called Mark. Speakerphone. Mark answered immediately, sounding exhausted. Ryan told him about the blanket. Long silence. Then Mark said, she told me she mailed something, but she wouldn't tell me what. I asked if he knew about the mom stitching. Another silence. Then quietly he said, she's been referring to your daughter as her sometimes. I felt physically ill. Mark sounded broken, like someone who'd been trying to hold back a flood with duct tape. He admitted Emily had become obsessed with Clara's photos online, saving them, printing them, talking about milestones she expected her baby to hit. At one point she apparently told him, maybe this is God's way of fixing the mistake. Ryan muted the phone and asked me one question. Do you want to wait until she escalates further? That was the moment I finally stopped minimizing everything. Because I realized something horrifying. I had been more afraid of hurting Emily's feelings than protecting my own child. The conditioning ran that deep. So we made the call. Not police. Not yet. But we contacted a lawyer first. And apparently when you show a lawyer a blanket stitched with love, Mom, from a grieving relative who's fixated on your infant, they get serious very fast. We were advised to document everything. Texts, voicemails, social posts, packages, all of it. The lawyer also recommended a formal written boundary notice. Not a restraining order yet, but something establishing clear documentation if escalation continued. Writing that email was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because it felt cruel. Even though every rational part of me knew it wasn't. We wrote that Emily was not permitted unsupervised contact with Clara. We requested no gifts, no visits, and no references implying parental attachment. We encouraged her to seek immediate professional support, and we stated clearly that further concerning behavior would force us to involve authorities. I cried after sending it. Ryan held me and said, "You are not punishing her, you are protecting our daughter." I wanted to believe him. Then Emily replied, "One sentence, that's it, just, so you're stealing her twice." And that's when I finally understood something. There was no perfect wording, no amount of compassion that would make this okay in her mind, because she wasn't operating inside reality anymore. Things detonated after that email. My dad called screaming, not upset, screaming. He accused us of humiliating Emily during the worst period of her life. He said threatening legal action against family was disgusting. Ryan took the phone from me at one point and said, "Your daughter thinks our child belongs to her." My dad shouted back, "She lost a baby?" And Ryan said, "That does not entitle her to ours." Click. Call ended. Then extended family started choosing sides publicly. Cousins stopped talking to each other. My aunt made passive-aggressive Facebook posts about weaponizing mental health. One relative told my mom she created this situation by babying Emily for decades. Apparently that caused a screaming match at Sunday dinner. My parents started fighting constantly. Because for the first time ever, my dad blamed my mom for enabling Emily, and my mom blamed my dad for emotionally checking out and leaving her to manage everything alone. 31 years of family dysfunction started spilling out all at once. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, I felt calmer. Because the truth was finally visible. Ugly, painful truth. But truth. No more pretending Emily was just sensitive. No more pretending I was selfish for having boundaries. No more pretending everyone else had to shrink themselves to stabilize one person. The craziest part? The peace didn't come from fixing the family. It came from finally stopping the performance. For about 2 weeks after the email, things were quiet again. No messages from Emily, no packages, no surprise visits. Nothing, and honestly, that almost made it worse. Because every time the house creaked at night, my brain filled in the blanks. Every unknown number made my chest tighten. Every walk with Clara felt strangely exposed. I started checking the locks 3 times before bed. Ryan installed the cameras. I stopped posting photos online completely. And through all of it, I kept asking myself the same question: how did we get here? Because this wasn't just one traumatic event. This was years of unspoken dysfunction finally colliding with tragedy. Then came the Thursday night knock. 9:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because Clara had finally fallen asleep after screaming for almost an hour with gas pains, and I was sitting on the couch half dead, eating cold pasta from a container. The knock wasn't aggressive, just firm, 3 knocks. Ryan looked at the camera feed on his phone first. Then his entire expression changed. He said, "Don't open the door." It was Emily, standing barefoot on our porch, holding something. At first I thought it was flowers. Then the camera adjusted focus. It was a baby carrier, empty. My entire body went numb. Ryan immediately locked the deadbolt even though it was already locked. Emily knocked again. Then she said softly through the door, "I just want to talk." I started crying instantly, not because I wanted to see her, because hearing her voice suddenly made everything real again. Ryan told me to go upstairs with Clara. I refused, I don't know why. Part of me still needed to believe I could fix this somehow. Then Emily said, "I brought her things." Plural, things. Ryan spoke through the door. He said, "Emily, you need to leave." She ignored him. Then she held up the carrier and said, "I know she still fits in this one." That sentence made the air leave my lungs, because it meant she'd been tracking Clara's growth closely enough to know. Ryan told me quietly, "Call the police." I froze. I'd never called the police on anyone in my life, certainly not my sister. Emily must have heard him because she suddenly started crying, not loud at first, just shattered. She said, "Please don't do that to me." Then she added, "I already lost one baby." And for one horrible second I hesitated again. That instinct to protect her feelings was still there, even now. Then Ryan asked me something I'll probably remember forever. He said, "If this was happening to Clara 20 years from now, what would you tell her to do?" And immediately the answer became obvious. Protect your child, every time. I picked up my phone. The second Emily realized I was actually making the call, she panicked. Not violent, panicked. She started saying, "No, no, no, I'm not dangerous. I'm not dangerous." Then she accidentally said the worst thing she could have said. She said, "I just needed to hold her once." Ryan opened the door then, but only enough to step outside and keep her from seeing into the house. He told her very calmly to put the carrier down and step back. And I swear to God, the expression on her face when he blocked the doorway, it looked like grief mixed with betrayal, like he was keeping something from her. That's when I finally understood how deep this had gone. In her mind, this wasn't obsession. It was loss, distorted, dangerous loss. The police arrived surprisingly fast, not full sirens or anything dramatic. 2 officers, very calm, very careful. And honestly, once they started talking to Emily, I could tell almost immediately they realized this wasn't some criminal mastermind situation. This was a mental health crisis. Emily kept insisting she wasn't trying to take Clara, then in the same breath said, "She knows me." She had met Clara maybe 4 times. One officer asked why she brought the carrier. Emily said, "In case she needed comfort." The officer asked who. Emily answered, "My baby." And there it was again, not confusion, delusion. The officers eventually convinced her to call my mom. When my mom arrived and saw the police outside our house, I think reality finally hit her fully. She looked 10 years older instantly. Emily completely broke down when she saw her, collapsed sobbing, kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." My mom cried too. The officers strongly recommended immediate psychiatric evaluation. To my shock, Emily agreed, not because she suddenly understood everything. I think she was just exhausted, utterly exhausted. As they walked her toward my mom's car, she looked back at me one last time and quietly said, "I really did love her." I believed her. That was the terrifying part. A few days later, Mark came over alone. First time I'd seen him without Emily in months. He looked hollow, like someone who'd aged 5 years in a season. He apologized immediately. For all of it. For not speaking up sooner. For enabling things. For hoping it would somehow resolve itself naturally. Then he told us something neither of us knew. Apparently after the pregnancy loss, Emily became convinced she was having recurring dreams. dreams where a little girl kept calling her mom. At first, Mark thought it was grief processing. Then Emily started describing the child. Blonde curls, small birthmark near the shoulder, green eyes. Clara has a tiny birthmark near her shoulder, not visible in most photos, but visible in one hospital picture I had posted briefly before deleting it. Mark said that's when he started getting scared, because Emily interpreted it as proof. Proof Clara was meant for her somehow. He admitted he should have intervened harder sooner. But every time he pushed back, Emily spiraled deeper. Crying, panic attacks, talking about fate, talking about signs, talking about correcting the story. Then he said something that completely shattered me. He said, she genuinely believed if she held Clara long enough, maternal instinct would recognize her. I couldn't even process that sentence at first. Ryan just stared at him. Mark burst into tears, actual sobbing, and said, I didn't know how to save her. That's the thing nobody talks about with situations like this. There usually aren't villains twirling mustaches, just broken people drowning in something bigger than them. Emily wasn't evil, she was sick. And unfortunately, sickness doesn't erase danger. Emily was admitted for inpatient psychiatric treatment, voluntarily at first, then extended longer after evaluation. I'm not sharing details because honestly, some things deserve privacy. My mom started therapy too, which I never thought would happen in a million years. My dad barely talks these days unless it's practical conversation. I think he's carrying a lot of guilt for ignoring problems until they exploded. Mark filed for temporary separation, not because he stopped loving Emily, but because he realized love alone wasn't stabilizing anything anymore. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. I still jump when someone knocks unexpectedly. I still hesitate before posting photos. Sometimes I still feel guilty. Then I remember the blanket, the nursery wall, the empty carrier, and the guilt fades. The hardest part is this: I miss my sister. Not the version from the last few months, the old version, the one before grief and obsession hollowed her out, and maybe that's selfish too, because Mark lost his wife emotionally long before any of us admitted it. My mom lost the daughter she thought she understood, and Emily lost everything.